it was funny because we were walking up to the game and I had just like bawled cried to Drew on FaceTime, like, I want to quit. Like, I don't want to play this next game. And we're walking to warm up and I'm just in the worst mood. And a bird poops on me. And Betsy and I look at each other and we just start like dying laughing. And she's like, it's going to be a good game.
Welcome to ChampionThis podcast with Brianna, Salvatore, Dueck, and Chelsea Poppens, where we talk about the incredible stories of athletes and entertainers who are using their platforms to create positive change in the world and the communities they live in.
We're so excited because we have guest Julia Scoles on the pod today. Julia is a powerhouse. She's a pro beach volleyball player and a member of Team USA, where she's racked up some really impressive titles, including the 2022 AVP Rookie of the Year and the 2023 AVP Most Improved Player. She also had a super illustrious college career. She started her career off at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where she earned Freshman of the Year, AVC All-American Honorable Mention, before then transitioning to beach volleyball at University of Hawaii. She finished up her last 2 years at USC, where she earned her graduate studies degree. She became an All-American and back-to-back national champion. She's also recently married Drew Donlin, who's also a super athlete, member of Team USA handball. And most importantly, Julia is passionate about mentorship and giving back to the next generation of athletes. Welcome to the pod, Julia.
Wow, that is quite the intro. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys for the work you do and highlighting people's stories.
Yeah, super excited. Actually, Bree's intros used to be way longer. She used to be she used to be like super well researched, and we've actually slimmed them down a little bit.
Wow, I know. As you were saying that, I'm like, whoa, I forgot about all of these things, and then I did end up going to 3 universities.
You're like, who am I? Yeah, well, we love to kind of like touch base on you, let our listeners get to know you a bit better by digging into like how you found your passion for volleyball and what initially drew you to the sport. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, growing up, I naturally gravitated to all sports, all athletics. So I pretty much tried everything under the sun. I did gymnastics, soccer, basketball, track and field. One of my friends invited me to a rec league volleyball practice, and that's when I first got introduced to the sport, and I fell in love with it from there, as I did all pretty much other sports, and just kind of hit the ground running and took it as far as I could. But yeah, that love for the sport began at an early age.
Had your parents played volleyball, or why? Like, how come that's the one that stuck and not basketball? Because, you know, the hooper in me is like, Jules also could have been an All-American, been my teammate. I was an All-American, but you could have been, you know, a hooper as well.
Yeah, so my mom played volleyball in high school, but she, same thing, did pretty much every sport that she could. She did field hockey, ice hockey, swimming, basketball, volleyball. So yeah, I also played competitive basketball in high school. I was on a travel team and played for my high school, and I absolutely loved basketball. So I'm jealous of you guys for excelling at that next level and playing it super competitively. But I wasn't as good at basketball, I would say. But my love for basketball was probably parallel. But I loved volleyball practices probably more than I loved basketball practices. So I thought if I'm going to play a sport at the next level, I have to fall in love with the process and with the training. And I think I could do that more easily with volleyball.
That's fair. Okay, we'll let you.
We'll let it slide. You were pretty successful at volleyball, so it's not like you chose wrong.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's incredible. But we do have to get you out on the Venice Beach courts this summer. I'm gonna bring you in as my teammate for the Venice Ball League.
Do you still play, Jules? No. The last I've played basketball was just like horse and pig with my husband. We just went out to like a local park court and shot around, but it was pretty tragic. So I'll stick to volleyball now.
It's muscle memory at this point.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, to dive into your journey a little bit further, you know, in the intro, we talked about your super successful college career. You played at UNC Chapel Hill, where you were, again, that freshman of the year, honorable mention. All-American, and this was for indoor volleyball, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
And then you ended up transitioning to University of Hawaii to play beach volleyball. And you finished up your career at USC with those back-to-back national championships and becoming an All-American. Can you talk to us about why you decided to switch to beach? And talk to us a little bit about your career as well in college.
Yeah. So growing up in North Carolina, I was not living near a beach at the time. I had never played beach volleyball, except for watching it in the Olympics. And whenever I watched it in the Olympics, it always intrigued me. But I committed to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill at a pretty early age. And they did not have a beach volleyball program. So I played indoor there. And then I had some pretty serious concussions. And I never actually returned to the indoor game. But at the time when I was in recovery, there was a beach volleyball club team. And so I met with the president and asked if I could just start practicing with them, and they were willing. And when I stepped on the beach court, I felt none of the fear that I felt on the indoor side of things. And so I was like, if I want to continue my athletics career, I knew that I would have to switch to beach volleyball because just from a safety standpoint, the sport is drastically more safe than indoor volleyball. Like the element of sand slows the game down substantially. The ball is a little bigger and softer, and tactically the game's played a lot differently. So in indoor, most girls are hitting the ball 100%, 90% of the time, where in beach, you still play an aggressive game, but a lot of the shots are off speed and placing the ball where the opponent is not. So there was just many facets of the beach game that provided an opportunity for me to continue athletics in a safe way. And so that year was just a really challenging year figuring out what the next steps would look like. And so I put my name in the transfer portal to talk to different beach programs, and ultimately decided on the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I finished my undergrad there, transitioned to beach while I was there. And then I had 2 years of eligibility left, one because of my medical hardship from my concussions, and then one because of the COVID year. So I got 2 years back. And so I did two grad programs at USC and finished my eligibility there. So it was quite the journey.
That's awesome.
That's the truncated version.
I got 2 grads while I was there, had a little extra time. And the University of Florida isn't a bad pick. Like that's a pretty great place to pick.
No. University of Southern California, USC,
Yeah,
the Trojans,
sorry.
baby.
What did I just say? Did I say University of Hawaii?
Florida.
Oh my! Okay, I said that in the back of my mind subconsciously because I went to the University of Florida. I meant to say the University of Hawaii. I just had a dyslexic moment.
No, I totally get that.
But
yes.
You had multiple concussions. What kind of was? I asked because I had 3 concussions. But what was kind of the scenario where you kind of were put in that situation to get those concussions?
Yeah, so the first one happened my freshman season, and we were in a practice doing a drill called Coach on One. And it's just you and the coach on the court, and they're hitting the ball at you, throwing the ball every single direction, and it's kind of a conditioning type drill. And I remember my coach tossing the ball to the deep corner, and I could have easily ran there, stayed on my feet to play the ball. But instead of doing that, I took a step towards the ball and then launched myself in its direction. And I was probably parallel to the ground, like 3-4 feet. And then my teeth, nose, forehead hit, bounced back up and re-hit. And I blacked out. And it was pretty excruciating after that initial impact. I've never had a concussion before. And instantly I was hit with every kind of symptom from a concussion that you could imagine, but in an extreme way. So I felt like the room was spinning entirely. I felt like my eardrums were going to explode. The light was piercing. I was dry heaving and vomiting, and all of those things were happening. I'm like, I felt like I was literally dying. I asked my trainer, I'm like, am I dying? But it was just very scary. But then after that initial impact and the symptoms started to subside, it was just like 2 weeks of like a little bit more, like a lot more mild symptoms, more annoying than anything. but I just still didn't feel well. But then after those 2 weeks, I remember being like, wow, like it only took me 2 weeks to recover. Like, I'm actually glad that it was a concussion over like a bad ankle sprain or a break, because I would have been out for way longer. And that was such a naive statement because I didn't understand what a brain injury meant long term and how it made you susceptible to future ones, and how those can compound, and what PCOS is, post-concussion syndrome, and just all of the things that entail, from TBIs. Like, it is a TBI, it's a traumatic brain injury. A concussion is a low grade. But because the brain is so unknown, there's no way to know the actual effects that it will have on a person.
Yeah, but also like the effects of it on school and how that affects your academics at the time too. Like, you go into classrooms and the light bothers you, or you have to take notes, or you're tired, or you just can't remember what the professor said. And for you to be suffering symptoms for 2 weeks, like, that already sets you back academically. If it's affecting you to the level that, like, especially that you had, just in general, that's really tough.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure.
Going back to the school piece, my second concussion actually was way worse symptomatic wise long term, and it really affected my vision. So I had to go through vision therapy all of the fall semester and retrain my eyes on how to track and read properly, because whenever I went to class for the first time after receiving my second concussion, my eyes reading more than a sentence could not follow, like could not track. And so it was a very scary feeling, because it's like, what is happening? Like, I had no idea that concussions could cause stuff to be ocularly involved.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is scary. I had a couple concussions in college as well. And I remember one of them actually was like a little bit of a get out of jail free card, because I had a big midterm the next day that I was not ready for. So I ended up getting out of it because of my,
Are you admitting to a fake one?
which was like, praise God, that was a little bit helpful for that. But for like a month, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus. And yeah, it is really scary because it is unseen, and it's easy, I think, even in the world of sports, to be like, nope, tough it up, you're fine. Like, we can tough it up through an ankle injury or whatever. But when it comes to your brain, like, being really discerning and destigmatizing like that injury, I think is really important, or just bringing more awareness to that. And Julia, I know that's something that you're really passionate about as well. Like, now you become much more of an advocate for kind of raising awareness around concussions and safety, getting back onto the court. Like, can you share a little bit about your work in that space?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I got plugged in with Heads Together Health, which is a startup at the University of North Carolina. The head of concussion research founded this startup that offers symptom tracking, and then they're able to quantify that data and use it to inform protocol and how someone would return to sport. Return to learn is what they'd call it, for returning to classroom. And when I was at SC and I did an entrepreneurship program, I had a conversation with my doctor from Chapel Hill, and he basically provided an internship opportunity where I did a lot of market research for them, a lot of customer discovery. And then also at that time, Concussion Legacy Foundation is a nonprofit, and they just basically are a nonprofit that provide resources and advocate for concussion awareness, concussion protocols, safety, everything that you could imagine. Just kind of is that landing page for someone looking for a community when they're going through something like that. And they also do a mentorship program. So I was plugged in with that, and they pair you with girls who are going through, or boys, but I had girl mentees who are going through similar things that you've already gone through. and can provide a voice of hope and encouragement,
Wow.
and walk alongside them while they're in the recovery, because that's something that I lacked, because when I was recovering, I genuinely thought that I would never get to the other side or see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I would have to live with these symptoms and this state of just mental health for the rest of my life, and just find a way to manage it, and just constantly like be in pain, figuring out how to deal with and cope with that. But thankfully those feelings lie. And when you're in that dark space, like you think that's your reality, but in reality, like you have the ability to learn, to grow, to heal, to continue to get better. And looking back, like I would say I'm so much better for having gone through that season of my life, not just for my brain's health, but just like what I learned, how I grew in faith, and just, the perspective that it gave me afterwards. And then also the new path that it created for me with beach volleyball. I would not have found the sport if I didn't suffer those substantial concussions. So I can confidently say that I am 1,000 times better, not only health-wise, but also just as a person, and like how I've grown in that time. So I'm very thankful to be on the other side, but that's something that I didn't think was possible at the time.
I love how you tied faith into it, because obviously concussions aren't well known and people can't really measure the amount of time it takes for people to get back to 100%, or if they get back to 100% sometimes. And you really do just have to rely on like God during those times to be like, hey, can you get me back to where I used to be, or at least a baseline of where I need to be. And then also as athletes, I think we need to be humbled. I think God humbles us through these experiences, because a lot of times we think we're invincible because we're playing in college, we're getting these D1 scholarships and we're at the top of the world. Then we don't always value our health as much as we should. So I think it's like, for me, like knee surgeries, God had to remind me that like my body is important, and I had to make decisions for me, not just for my athlete career.
Yeah. Something that I clung to during that time was Romans 8:28, which says that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And I didn't truly understand that verse until you can see the way that God takes stuff in a broken world and still sovereignly works it out for your good and for his glory. And so now, anytime I go through a hardship, so this past year I had 2 knee surgeries, I'm like, all right, God, like what good is going to come from this? Because I think life is a beautiful dichotomy of really hard things, but really extraordinary and amazing things. And those coexist simultaneously. And it's so cool to see how God can use the hardest things in our lives to bring about the most good.
Yes, Julia, preach. I love. And it's so true. Like if I think about my own life as well, it's always the biggest trials that I've faced that have refined my character and made me stronger. And I think another piece, like you mentioned, hope, I heard that coming up a lot when you were sharing. And I think one thing that our faith provides is a hope, in the fact that God does work out all things for our good. But in the same respect, like it's just so beautiful to see you being hope to other girls and really living that truth that you yourself have experienced and that you embody, and being able to inspire the next generation through your mentorship and all the awesome work that you're doing. So we love it. I'm feeling inspired and fired up hearing you talk. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and dive into kind of that transition for you from college volleyball into professional volleyball. So like, how did you decide to play professional volleyball? And then also like, I'm sure being on the court, it's a little bit of a different level than college volleyball, although you came in and crushed it. We're rookie of the year on the AVP tour, but yeah, nonetheless, like what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so I felt very blessed and fortunate for the doors that God opened there with partnerships and just different opportunities that I feel like I could not even plan or orchestrate the way that they unfolded without God's hand being totally over it. So I just felt like when I finished with SC, my first partner on the AVP was Gina Urango, and she is such a phenomenal individual and athlete, and I viewed her as a mentor, and she kind of took me under her wing, and kind of just showed me the ropes of what it looked like to prepare at the professional level, as well as everything that goes into training, travel, logistics, because with college, everything is kind of spoon-fed for you. And at the professional level, you're not signing to a sports organization or a sports team. You're basically communicating with one other person, and it's like, hey, you want to play professional beach volleyball? All right, let's do it. And like, let's sign up for these tournaments. So you're the director of ops, you're the travel agent, like you're everything you could imagine. The team manager, like all of the things that have been done for you is now the onus is on you and your teammate to figure that out. And I just felt like she did such a good job of leading by example, and just made it very easy to kind of make that transition to the next level. And I also felt very fortunate for the preparation from SC and from Hawaii, because there's not really that much of a difference with skill level from college to pro. Like, it is very competitive, and same thing with like the top tournaments internationally. Like, the skill level as you continue to grow is a lot smaller difference than when you're maybe in high school, and so a few points separates you from the next team and vice versa. And so just feeling like my undergraduate programs provided a great foundation to continue to build at that next level.
Do you think that the COVID years too provided you a little extra time to really fully prepare and get your skills to that level too, as you stepped into the pro level?
Oh, absolutely. I would say when I switched from indoor to beach, I had no idea how different the two sports were. Yeah, I got out on the sand with the club team, but I never actually trained at a Division I collegiate level for beach volleyball. And it was a rude awakening and very humbling. Like, I felt like a giraffe on the sand trying to find my way. And I was genuinely awful at the sport. Like, I was very bad. Like, it was pretty embarrassing. I remember calling my dad like 2 weeks before the season, like, Dad, like, I want to quit. Like, I've never wanted to quit anything in my life with athletics. Like, I normally like, I want to rise to the challenge. Like, and I just don't think people understand, or until they go through it, of how difficult that transition is. And so I think with indoor girls wanting to make the transition to beach maybe after college, with the development of the beach side on the collegiate level, I think they're just a step behind, and it takes a longer time to make that transition. So I felt very fortunate to have the time to kind of just develop as a player, understand the game better, and yeah, I get that time in a controlled environment before it's like what you are relying on to pay rent, you know?
Yes.
And there's so much more pressure.
And people don't realize how hard it is to jump in sand.
Exactly. It's so hard.
Oh, it's so difficult.
I was to say, I remember on my official visit to Hawaii, I was watching the girls in a tournament on the beach at Queens, Waikiki, which is some of the deepest sand in the world. And I remember watching them run around like, how are they doing this right now? And then I was like, oh, I'm like a little hungry. I'm going to get up and go to a little spot down the road to get something to eat. And I got up and I started walking in the sand. I was like hyperventilating, like walking. And I'm like, okay, I know I also have been out from my injuries. So like, I need to not only get in beach volleyball shape, like I need to get back in shape, period. But beach volleyball shape is just like a different animal compared to indoor. So I was like, this is going to be something.
So brutal. I know some of my conditioning workouts in the summer would be literally doing the like dunes in LA. I don't know where it is, but there's this like big dune hill, and just walking up that thing, you're like, that's my workout. Do it twice and I'm good.
Yeah.
It's another level. It's so crazy.
We just had grassy hills in Iowa. No sand.
So you enter the scene, start playing pro beach volleyball. And about, I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago, you met your current doubles partner, Betsy Flint, total boss, has like top serve in all of beach volleyball, tons of accolades from college and on the AVP tour and the FIVB tour as well. How did you meet her? And tell us a little bit about like your collective mission as well and what it's meant to join together as a team.
Yeah, so originally when I started playing professionally, I did not have my sights set on the international tour because I was finishing a grad degree at SC, and my goal was to make all the main draws on the domestic tour on the AVP the first year. And international, which is the FIVB, was not on my radar because I just didn't think it was in the cards with balancing school and travel and everything like that. And then after the AVP season, there were some opportunities to play in some international events, and I was asked to compete in them. And I couldn't turn down the opportunity. And when I was playing at my first event, I get a call from Betsy, and she says, Julia, like, there's an Elite 16, which is the top tier professional event, our professional tournaments in Australia in December. Like, the deadline's tomorrow night. We need to sign up. Would you want to play with me? And I was like, yeah, I definitely want to play with you. And she's like, but like, you need to get some points first for us to be in the main draw. And so I had 2 tournaments left to go in Dubai after the first tournament that I was in Maldives. And she's like, you need to do well at these events for us to play in this main draw. And I was like, okay. And I ended up doing pretty decent in those events. I got a 3rd in one and a 4th in the next. And that put us into the main draw in Australia. And that was the first tournament that Betsy and I played together in. And we ended up doing pretty well. We got a silver medal there.
Wow.
And to get to the finals, we ended up beating the Olympic silver medalist from Tokyo. And so it was just like, okay, like, this is clicking. Like, let's continue and like try to make a push for Paris 2024. And so because we did well in that tournament, it put us in a good position to pursue the Paris Games with coaches stipend and just from USA Volleyball support. And so we made a full Olympic run and ended up being the 3rd team out. Only 2 teams make it. And so we're alternates for Paris, but we went through the full Olympic qualification. We played in 12 international events in that time frame. And it was just a grueling, fulfilling, hard, joyful, amazing experience. So it would, like, I wouldn't change it for the world, even though it was very, very challenging. It was just such a formative year for our partnership, for my individual growth, just experience-wise. I had never been to Europe or that side of the world before the past year, and now I can say I've been to like countless countries and played in countless tournaments, and it's been a really cool journey.
You made it sound like such an extravagant lifestyle. You're like, Dubai, the Maldives, Australia. You want to go to Australia next weekend? But
No,
I mean, like,
that's the funny part, is that sometimes it does appear to be extravagant, but then when you're in it, you're like
work.
You're like taking red eyes, like in planes for 14 hours. Like, it's not a glamorous life. There's some glamorous moments, but most of the time it is not a glamorous lifestyle.
No, the flight to Australia is absolutely not glamorous.
It's so bad. Yeah.
Oh, it's the longest time capsule ever. But to expand on that, like, obviously everything looks good to people looking from the outside. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges? Because obviously it's not always smooth sailing when you're trying to like prepare and reach this level of play as a pro volleyball player. Can you talk to us about like what challenges, what hurdles you faced, like just some really tough times for you during this time?
Yeah, so during Olympic qualification, I was dealing with an overuse injury that progressively got worse and worse and worse. And I was just managing pain levels pretty much near the end of the season. And we would practice one time before major tournaments. And we would just say, all right, like drugs and adrenaline. Like I had some like prescription.
Drugs and
like,
adrenaline.
yeah. I had some like painkillers that were
Break.
of course like prescribed. But also the adrenaline piece like helped me get through some of these tournaments. And it was just a mental battle of like will pretty much on knowing that like we need to play in these events to put ourselves in the best opportunity. And I also was wise about it, knowing that I did not want to have a long-term consequence from what I'm pushing my body through now. And the medical support staff around me really like walked through that process with me and was like, you'll have time to like get surgeries and heal in the off season. Just knowing that this was going to be kind of a battle. And then within that, just the dynamic of a partnership in any relationship, like you're two different people coming together, trying to reach a common goal. But you have different needs, different perspectives, different weaknesses, different strengths. And so learning the dance of that with another individual is something that's incredibly challenging, but also incredibly rewarding because of the trust that you build, because of how you're personally refined, and how you grow and learn from that individual, and just genuinely figure out what do we need to do collectively to be best as a team and not individually. And so it's a lot of like dying to pride, and just I bring my faith element within this and view it as like a sanctification process, because I'm constantly confronted on a daily basis in practice and tournaments with like my selfishness, with my pride, with anger, with all of these things that are kind of uglier parts of our hearts that we don't normally deal with on a daily basis, that I feel like you're in almost like an incubator or pressure cooker for those things to come out. And it's like, how am I going to become a good teammate? How am I going to die to myself to benefit the team and what the team needs? And that's an ongoing process, but it's something that regardless of who you're playing with, that everyone has to deal with, just figuring out that dance.
That's a beautiful way to put it too, because you and I were laughing, or all of us were laughing because we all had knee injuries. We're talking about how our mood is dependent on how our body feels. And we're like, oh yeah, I was a little bit spicy that day. And I'm like, we're all handling our own things, but also Betsy is a mother too. Like you said, people have their different things that they're trying to balance in their life, but that was beautifully put.
Absolutely. And I remember last year, during this journey, I was dating my now husband, and we were like progressing and dating, and this couple at our church recommended this book to us. And it was basically a book for married couples. So I don't know why we were reading it. And I remember reading it.
Was it Love Languages?
No, it was called Sacred Marriage, but it was basically all about marriage. And so in it, I was like, this is not really applicable to like our stage of life right now. But then it was wildly applicable to my relationship with Betsy. Like, I was like using everything I was learning in the book, like, and applying it to our relationship and not to Drew and I's relationship.
That's hilarious.
Betsy's your true work wife. I love it.
Yeah, she's my work wife.
It's so good. But I honestly like hearing you share that is really beautiful and inspiring. And a lot of people don't talk about that. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily have the humility and the heart posture to stay low in the context of a team. And that team could be your literal like sports team, or at your company, your job, or a nonprofit you serve in, or wherever. Like, I think our pride and our like selfishness can, I definitely am guilty of this, but can get in the way of the good of, the team. And so being able to be really self-aware and like keeping that humble posture, I think is huge. And just seeing you and Betsy out on the court and in real life, like I can attest to the power of your team. It is like beautiful and strong. And like LA 2028, watch out. These women are going to be on the floor crushing it. And in the 4 years leading up to it, like accolades for days. I'm so excited to watch how you two crush it together.
Speaking of faith, I know you've kind of already touched on it, and it's always been laced throughout this entire conversation. But do you have any like specific moments, or like how your faith has informed your purpose and the role you see yourself playing as an athlete, and your identity in it?
Yeah, that is such an awesome question. I think it all started with my relationship in sport to begin with. I think God has used sport as such a tool in my life. And in the beginning of my sport career, I would view my faith as a means to achieve my will through my sport. So I'd be like, God, like, please help us win this game. Like, just like praying for like success and just like thinking
As we
like,
all
that,
do.
yeah, as we all do, was like God's will for my career, was just to be successful. But I didn't realize how much of an idol it was in my life, and how like God does not design us to have idols that are fulfilling other than Him. And I didn't realize that. So I put everything, all of my purpose, all of my identity, my soul into this sport that was finite and that ultimately returns void with anything that I invest into it that's not ultimately rooted in Him. And so whenever I had my first injury and concussions, and where my sport was stripped away, and so much more was stripped away because of the nature of the injury. So like I had to medically underload in school. So I lost my identity as a student, as an athlete. My personality changed before my eyes because of the mental health stuff with the concussion. So there was so much that I didn't recognize about my life and about myself that I was like, okay, if everything in life that I cling to is taken away, what is there? And I always claimed to be a Christian. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I had an understanding of salvation, but I never took ownership of my faith and sought first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. And I remember being like, okay, God, like, if you're real, like, I want to find out more about you and what this life is about. And during that time, like, it was probably the hardest time I've ever walked through, but God was walking alongside me, and I felt His presence in such a tangible way, and the peace that surpassed understanding. Like, though we will have trials and tribulations in this world, like, take heart, for He has overcome the world, and just all of His promises that ring true in Scripture, I'm like clinging to for the first time. And so as I was navigating this transition to beach, and how God clearly opened doors with these opportunities, I almost viewed Hawaii as the promised land of like, okay, like once I get there, like things are going to be better. Like I'm going to figure out beach volleyball. I'm going to like have a new life, XYZ. And I was missing the point where God was like, no, wherever you're at, the grass will never be greener on the other side. Like, seek me and find me and my purpose for you. And when you're walking in step with me, that is the most fulfilling and joyful place you can be. And so I remember my first year in Hawaii was awful because I still tried to just put my faith in a box. And I said, okay, God, like, this is my faith box, this is my volleyball box, this is my student box, like, this is my social box. And I just continually try to use God as this like cosmic vending machine to like get what I wanted in this world. And then I remember flying back to Hawaii my second year. I'm in the middle of the plane. My tears are streaming down my face. And I'm like, I can't live this year again. Like, I can't go through this again. And I remember like in my dorm room sitting there and like, I'm like, God, like, I'm going to actually put you first, and for the first time in my life. And I'm going to mean that. And Matthew says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And so I was like, you know what? Like, for the first time, I'm going to seek you first and not my will. Like, I'm going to surrender. And I remember that moment, literally just getting to a place of complete surrenderance and like Lord, have your way in my life, have your way in my heart. And since that point, it has not been perfect. Like, I'm a sinner, I fall short daily. But God has radically transformed my life, transformed my perspective, restored, redeemed all of the broken parts of my story. And it has been exceedingly and abundantly more than I could ask for, think, or imagine. And yeah, it's just, I forget how radically different my life is now, because it's been kind of quite a bit of time since that point. But it's like, wow, God, you are so good and you are so faithful. And you are faithful year after year after year. And you were so faithful in my disobedience too. When I was an enemy of you, you were still sovereign and you were still guiding and leading me. And yeah, so that is kind of the way that faith has shaped my relationship with sport. And then when I got back to playing, it was not like, oh, I'm using this thing to define me, this sport to define me, but I'm using this sport to refine me now. So not only am I loving the gift it is to play in freedom and not have this define me, but also, like, how is this growing me? How is this stretching me? How is this, igniting a deeper faith and helping me look more like Jesus?
Wow, mic drop. Okay, I think that's a wrap for the podcast.
Jules' discipleship.
No, but so good, so powerful, and yeah, such an important truth to be reminded of. But I love that, like, it's brought freedom to you in life, and it's not a self-serving thing, but it's like staying low and seeking first God's will for your life and like what He has for you, and then I don't know, like the freedom that's come with that heart posture is like so beautiful. And not that it's not a struggle, but because of course it is a struggle daily, but it's also like beautiful at the same time. And there's so much joy that resonates out of you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We love that.
Of course.
Yeah, also wanted to talk a little bit about your recent marriage. So we mentioned briefly in the intro, you've married Drew Donlin, who is a member of Team USA Handball, all around athlete. We got to hang out at the beach in LA about a year ago now. But you both travel a lot for your sport. You're both kind of crushing it in your respective lanes. How are you able to, in your marriage, stay as a strong team and support each other and kind of be each other's hype men and women?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're close to 2 months of marriage, so I don't feel like I can offer that great of wisdom or advice, because we're so early on and I'm like, oh yeah, I've got this marriage thing figured out.
But
I
even
think,
like the relationship side,
yeah,
like beforehand, it's almost like you're there.
yeah. So just knowing like that we've kept God at the center of our relationship, or strive to. And I think that just provides such a solid foundation, knowing that God has created good works for Drew to walk into. God has created good works for me to walk into. And knowing that this relationship is not about meeting my emotional needs, or me meeting every one of his needs, but it's about our Creator meeting our needs, and then us spurring one another on in our respective callings. And I think that at times, like, my flesh is like, no, like, I just want you to support me in everything that I do. And just like knowing like that He has such a profound platform, and the way that He is able to share the gospel, and live out His calling, and just all the doors that God has opened for him in his career and his sport. And it's been very cool to see those parallels, as Bree, you and Justin, and I'm not sure what your future husband's name is, but I'm sure you guys, Ryan, can relate that, like, you guys make one another better and sharpen one another, call each other out when it's needed, but ultimately are each other's biggest supports and confidants.
I love that. And have you guys had a conversation on like collective goals that you guys want to achieve, whether that be like individual, how to support each other's goals, and then figure out what that looks like together?
Yeah, so we we were plugged in at 2 separate churches, but now we're at the same church, but it's different than each of our respective churches. So we're kind of starting a new page there. And our first night serving together in youth group was last night. And so that was super special. And I know he has like a passion for youth, and so do I. And just being able to pour into the next generation and to help kids with what we struggled with during that age, and kind of the insights that we've had, and just teaching them about the love of God and how much they're cared for and loved and created in his image, and have a purpose. I think we're both passionate about that, and be able to do that together is very special. And ultimately our dream is to have a family one day together, and to make disciples within our family, but then also make disciples extending to church family and our respective fields of sport and career.
Love. That's awesome. So before we sign off on the bulk of our main question portion of the podcast, we like to finish off every episode with a question where we ask our guests, what's the advice that you have for listeners who are looking to use their talents and passions to make the world a better place?
That's a great question. Based on a book I was reading yesterday, I think we can all get wrapped up in this idea of making a big impact in this grandiose, and having such a profound platform or whatever it may be, but to start small and to start with what's in front of you and to meet the needs of the people in front of you. And so those have a ripple effect. And so it may look very monotonous and very minuscule in the scheme of things, but just showing love from day to day, and saying yes to the different opportunities God has for you will bring you to a place you could never imagine. And so just faithfully and obediently saying yes to the small things each day will cause that hopefully bigger kingdom impact later.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in but I want to impact 1 million people. Even with the podcast, we're we want 10 million streams by the end of episode 1 or season 1. And I think I've been challenged too of if one listener feels inspired coming off of an episode, which after listening to you, Julia, 1,000% is going to be the case for all the listeners. But it's also, I think being faithful with the platform that you've been given and where you are now, till the land in front of you. But yeah, I love that word. So good.
Beautiful on both your parts. That was very well said.
Thanks.
All right. So we are at our lightning round. This is the best portion of the podcast. It's quick questions, 30 seconds to answer each. We don't really count, but try to keep it condensed. So for our first question, we have, what is your current pregame hype song or playlist, if you have a specific genre?
Anything by Andy Moreno. I actually normally don't listen to hype music. I just am someone who kind of sits in silence on the bus ride and doesn't really listen to hype music.
Wow.
But I've been the past 2 tournaments I've started listening to Andy Moreno. I'm like, why haven't I been doing this more often?
Why haven't I been listening to music?
Yeah.
In your silence, what do you think about?
I honestly kind of have a pretty clear mind, and just I'm honestly not thinking about too much. I'm just kind of sitting there and being.
I'm over here what is that like? That clear mind? What is a clear mind like?
Right.
I think I used to get so anxious and so nervous and have all these questions about the game and what it's gonna happen. Now I'm just it's gonna come, and I'm gonna try my best, and the outcome will be the outcome.
Oh, that's great. I used to get near the I used to actually like envision what the like specific scenarios on the court that I might get put in. Like, so I'd be warming up in my mind on the bus, like using a bit of imagery. So that, I don't know if that counts
Great.
as like a clear mind, but I was just,
Oh
I need
yeah,
to do something.
visualization is a great tool. I should use it more, but yeah,
It
I'm just
is.
like,
When I was at UC Davis, we used to actually have mind time before every practice and game. So our coaches are like big Phil Jackson fans, and apparently for the Lakers and the Bulls, he used to give the team members like 10 minutes to like be in silence in the dark and meditate. So our team, I mean, imagine a bunch of like 18 to 21-year-olds. Yeah, with the lights off every day before practice. But low key, I will say, especially on game days, I would like take it seriously. And I feel like it was helpful, right, to visualize that stuff. But
I think it's helpful when you know how to do it, because I think it's so hard to like just make a free throw in your mind sometimes. It sounds terrible.
So good. So Julia, next question. What is your most memorable or epic moment that you've experienced as a volleyball player?
whoa, that is a good question. I think the first thing that came to mind was last year at Elite 16 in Montreal, Canada. We were playing in the quarterfinals, and we were playing the number one team in the world. And we were down 9-14. And this was also the tournament where my knee pain was peak. And I cried. I was bawling crying before the start of the game. I was crying in the game, like at the service line. I remember the ref like, "Are you okay? Like, do you need to?" I'm like, "Just blow the whistle so that we can start the play." And Betsy was back to serve, and she went on a crazy service run. And we ended up winning the game 17-15. And then we won in the semifinals as well, and we had our best finish that year. And it was the hardest tournament I'd ever played. So just that idea again of an amazing thing can also coexist with something that was the hardest thing that you've endured. So that was probably the coolest
Can
moment.
you tell our listeners what specifically you had to do with your knee? Because people just say knee injuries, but to understand like the type of pain you might have been in.
Yes, so I had to do 10x procedure. There were different options. I could have gone through a regular surgery, but this was orthoscopic. And basically my tendon started to peel off where it was attaching to the bone, like 30%. And then the tendon itself had completely degenerated to tendinosis. So it was pretty much all damaged tissue. And when your knee tendon turns to tendinosis, it basically creates higher pain receptors in that area, telling your body that, hey, like, stop using me, like, we're damaged, whatnot. But unfortunately, like, you can still use it. Actually, fortunately, you can still use it, but your mind signals to your knee signals to your mind that you're in a lot of pain.
That's such a feat to work through for you, especially like at that like peak point in time.
Yeah, it was funny because we were walking up to the game and I had just like bawled cried to Drew on FaceTime, like, I want to quit, like, I don't want to play this next game. And we're walking to warm up and I'm just in the worst mood. And a bird poops on me. And Betsy and I look at each other and we just start like dying laughing. And she's like, it's going to be a good game. Like, we're going to find a way. And like that like was enough to like lighten the mood to, kind of change the tone of like showing up and how you showed up. And even though I was still in a lot of pain, it was just a funny moment that we knew something was going to come from it.
Oh my gosh, so good.
All right, third question. What is your favorite stop of the APV and FIVB tours?
My favorite stop of the FIVB tournament tour is Stade, Switzerland. It's this little ski town in the Swiss Alps that they built out a stadium in, and it is like so picturesque. You truly feel like you're in a storybook, like The Sound of Music. There's cows on the side of the mountain with bells, and it's just such a dreamy place, and you would not think that a beach volleyball tournament would be there. And yeah, so that's my favorite stop for the FIVB. And then AVP, I would probably say in our backyard, the Manhattan Beach Open is just such an iconic tournament, and has such a great legacy from the birthplace of our sport, to what it is now. And it's just like the best atmosphere, and it's just a really exciting, fun tournament to play in.
That's great. Okay, last question, Jules. Are you a trash talker on the court?
That's a good question. So, when we were in practices at USC, we had a trash talking culture, but in the best way. Like, it was kind of like lighthearted, joking trash talk that, like, some girls, like, you'd have to, like, I guess take the temperature of the room and not necessarily dish out some trash talk when they weren't in the right headspace. But for example, my former roommate, Haley Harward, when we would compete against each other in practices, I'd hit a ball and I'd be like, "Where were you?" And she would like scoop one of my digs or one of my hits, and she'd be like, "You're easy." And like, it was just a very fun banter. And I remember when we would compete, Haley like had a time where she let some of that slip out during a game, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I think the person like totally took it in the wrong way." And like, it was just like so natural from like how we trained. So honestly, I'm a fan of like lighthearted, like trash talk that's like never malicious, but it's fun. It's fun to play against. It's fun for the crowd. Like, as long as it doesn't cross any like extreme lines, like I'm all about getting passionate and playing aggressive and getting a little fiery out there. Like, I think it's a really fun way to play the sport.
Yeah, everybody loves a little grit, a little spiciness.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jules. It's been so great to hear your story. So great to hear your faith journey and how it plays into where you are now, and to even hear just some of your challenges and hurdles that you had to step through and walk through. I think it was really like beautiful the way you talk about like your partnership with Betsy playing a key role and having to like interact with her and work on it like it is a relationship. I think that so many people can take that into their life and apply it in different ways with their relationship, with work, with whatever they have going. So it's been super special. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Julia.
This has been such a joy, such a fun conversation.
And to our followers, to our listeners, if you like this podcast, like, share, follow. We will have all of Jules's information and Betsy's. We'll add some of her information in there too for you guys to follow and watch their journey and support everything that they have going.